We've had a lot of conversations in regards to the bullpen, starting pitching. Well, another name that's been thrown around, Ryan Helsley. Let's have a conversation. What's going on with Alek Manoah and some massive moves in the MLB?
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jays, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now the #1 sports podcast network. Your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. A lot to get into today. There has been a ton that has come out over the weekend, so we'll get into everything. As always, I'm Brayden Iwasco. He's Carter First. You can find us on Twitter, Brayden5 Iwasco. Carter First, too, as well, on our main one, at Locked On Jays. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok, at Locked On Blue Jays, and make sure you hit that subscribe button here on YouTube. Carter, my man, let's start here. We know we're going to have to get into the Alek Manoah of it all, and we'll talk about that in the second segment, some massive trades. But Ryan Helsley, talk of the town a little bit in regards to the Toronto Blue Jays. And it's not necessarily that there's some big article out there, but this is a guy that me and you have had plenty of conversations around over the last two seasons about the Blue Jays possibly acquiring him or what kind of fit he would be for this team. So I'll kick things over to you before we get into contract talks and whatever. Just talk about the fit a little bit.
Ryan Helsley is in a very intriguing arm. I mean, he's a fireballer. He throws absolute gas. Is that reliever that can blow the doors off hitters. And something that the Blue Jays have been looking for a while, or have been lacking, at least in recent history, out of the bullpen, is that guy that can just beat guys with velocity, that can throw the 99, the 100, the 101s. You have a few guys on the team that can sort of do that right now, not up to the Helsley caliber. Like Yimi Garcia can touch 100 from time to time. Again, it's very rare. Serenity Dominguez, when he was on the team, he does throw pretty hard, but again, it's not like that top tier 100 miles per hour velocity. And Ryan Helsley, there's nothing this offseason in particular that's been linked for the Toronto Blue Jays to Ryan Helsley, but they have been linked to top free agent relief pitchers. Edwin Diaz, we talked about. We're going to continue to talk about all the bullpen arms that this team definitely needs. I think if you ask pretty much any single Toronto Blue Jays fan, they would tell you that there definitely is a need to add just a little bit more competition at the back end of that bullpen. And Ryan Helsley was rumored to be traded to the Toronto Blue Jays at the trade deadline because this kind of was a problem that they had all of 2025. There was a lot of conversations that we had. Is Jeff Hoffman the closer? Jimmy Garcia goes down. Brendan Little, at one point, we were saying that, hey, maybe this guy should be the closer. Obviously, now that's probably not a conversation we're going to have anymore. But looking just at Ryan Helsley, like his average fastball velocity in 2025 was 99.3. So that's on average. This guy's hitting 100 consistently, has the ability to just absolutely wreck hitters. And can be a very frustrating at-bat as well. But one thing that I found interesting, I kind of wanted to start this here, is that if you're going to bring in Ryan Helsley as a Toronto Blue Jays fan, you probably want him as your closing pitcher. And people hated Jeff Hoffman. Me and you were pretty good, I think, with the Jeff Hoffman stuff. And again, like, a closing pitcher is kind of tough to love because when they blow up, it's cost you the game. Like, that's just kind of how it is. It's the last pitcher in the game's last guy you're going to remember. So I wanted to do this in terms of save opportunities. And Ryan Helsley and Jeff Hoffman kind of have similar stats in terms of they had a little bit of a down year per se in 2025. But Ryan Helsley's case is a little bit different. But just in the save opportunities, I'll remind you guys of the Jeff Hoffman save percentage, just in case we did forget there. So he went 33 for 40 in saves. At 83% of the time, he did get the save for the Toronto Blue Jays. Ryan Helsley last year went 21 for 30. That's 70%. That's actually worse than Jeff Hoffman. And Ryan Helsley, if you ask the common fan, especially, I guess, the Toronto Blue Jays fan, if considering they watched Jeff Hoffman in 2025, they'd probably tell you that Ryan Helsley is miles better than Jeff Hoffman. And I don't necessarily think that is the case. I do think that Ryan Helsley kind of had a down year, especially with the Mets. Kind of crazy, actually, the stats that he had with St. Louis, and then he gets traded to the Mets. Again, he wasn't the closer there because they have a guy that's pretty good, obviously, in Edwin Diaz. So he was predominantly pitching out of the eighth inning. But in terms of a guy that's a closer, a guy that can, throw for that velocity, it just shows how volatile these relief pitchers can be for a guy that was phenomenal from 2022, 2023, 2024. Those 3 years was absolutely ridiculous. Was very good at the start of 2025 as well. But yeah, something in New York, something in the air kind of turned him off a little bit. But this is the caliber of player that the Toronto Blue Jays should be looking for. They should be looking for that Devin Williams, that, Ryan Helsley, the Edwin Diaz, the Raisel Iglesias. Unfortunately, he has gone off the market for $16 million, which is a little bit crazy. But the Toronto Blue Jays should be in on a guy like Ryan Helsley. So I guess I'll frame this question to you based off of the 2025 stats that I'll kind of go into after your opinion here. But is Ryan Helsley a guy that you would want the Toronto Blue Jays to target?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought process here because yes, do I think they need bullpen help? Absolutely. I think anybody with two eyes can see that this team needs help in the back end. The issue is if you're going to go out and spend a ton of money on a reliever, to me, if you're going to pay a guy a ton, you need to go out and get one of those top tier guys. And do I consider Ryan Helsley right now a top tier high valued arm? He's high valued, but is he one of those best, the elite of the elite that this team would need? No. So can that money be then spent elsewhere as of right now? And Carter, we talk about, I know this is crazy to start thinking about already, the trade deadline, right? We have to think about the trade deadline because of what this team just did last season. You have to be thinking about what can they do in free agency, but then what can be done at the trade deadline. For me, a highly touted bullpen arm, a closer, that can be something this team goes after at the trade deadline. So I don't think your options are limited right now by who is on this market. Do they go out and get Diaz? I can't tell you. Again, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't be here making those kind of predictions. I can guess, but that's all it's going to be. What I can say is that there are 30 teams in this league with guys to choose from potentially at the trade deadline and just trades in general. A trade could be made this offseason for a top tier closing pitcher. And I think that would be okay to do. I don't think we just have to think in terms of who is available right now on the open market. So do I think, I guess to make, short story long here, is the fact that I don't think he is necessarily the guy that this team should or will go after. I think they did that with sort of the Jeff Hoffman last year. They brought him in. They, paid the heavy price for Jeff Hoffman, and he wasn't everything they hoped he was going to be. They didn't think he was going, or they thought he was going to come in and be an absolute dominant closing pitcher, and he just wasn't that. And I think that's sort of what I'm seeing here in the Helsley situation is you pay him a good amount of money coming off a down year. You expect him to bounce right back, but does he? Again, no one has a crystal ball. So as much as he intrigues me, and he was a guy I was high on at the trade market last season, I just don't think now is the time to pull the trigger on him, Carter.
It's, for me, there's a few red flags just in terms of bullpen arms entirely. Like, we'll start up with the market right now. Raisel Iglesias got signed for $16 million. And I think that Ryan Helsley is better than Raisel Iglesias personally. So I think he will get more money than Raisel Iglesias. And we talked about Edwin Diaz. We were saying 20 to 25 million. Edwin Diaz is probably as sure of a thing as you can get out of the bullpen. But based off a list from the MLB Network, they have Ryan Helsley as the fourth best option available on the waiver wire, or the waiver wire is not fantasy football, but on in free agency. And like Ryan Helsley, I'll go over the stats, which again, this is a little bit interesting, but another red flag with just how bad of a year that he did have, at least at the end of the year with the Mets. Again, unbelievable in 2022. The stats were off the charts, pretty much, exactly the closing pitcher that you would want at the back end of your bullpen. But as soon as he joined the Mets, he's pitched 20 innings for the New York Mets, and he had a 7.2 ERA, a FIP of 5.19, a WHIP of 1.8, a 4.95 walks per nine, gave up 4 home runs in those 20 innings. Again, there was a significant difference, though, when you go to New York compared to what he did in St. Louis. In St. Louis, he was the closer. He was the guy that went out in the 9th inning every single time. You didn't even blink an eye. Ryan Helsley was going to be that guy for you. When he went to the New York Mets, again, when you have Edwin Diaz there and how phenomenal what he was last year, you probably don't want to mess things up with that. You probably don't want to change anything, especially if it's going the right way. So he was predominantly pitching out of the 8th inning, sometimes the 7th inning as well for the New York Mets. And it was maybe something that he wasn't as comfortable in. Because we look at Jeff Hoffman before this season, he was never really a closing pitcher. He was always a guy that came out. Yes, he'd come out sometimes in the 9th inning, but it was usually the 7th or 8th inning, a guy that was predominantly a setup man before the season. So with Ryan Helsley, at least if he went to the Toronto Blue Jays, I think you'd have to have him as your closing pitcher. I think that's probably what you would want anyway. Again, with just the 99.3 average fastball velocity, you have a lot more leeway if you want to miss, in the strike zone, whether it's over the middle. If you miss outside the strike zone, is more preferred. But the higher velocity, obviously you have a little bit more room for error. So another thing I wanted to go into is just the appearances in the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings, and just I only did the ERA for this one. I didn't want to bore you guys with all the stats, but in the 7th inning, he made 7 appearances in 2025 and had a 10.8 ERA. Not great, obviously.
Yikes.
And you look in the 8th inning, he made 10 appearances, had a 7 ERA. When he was in St. Louis, when he was pitching out of the 9th inning, a 3.55 ERA. Not fantastic, but pretty solid. Like, I would take that for a lot of bullpen arms in the Toronto Blue Jays bullpen. So if you're going to sign Ryan Helsley, you're obviously going to have him as your closing pitcher. But I agree with the trade deadline sentiment that you brought up. With bullpen arms, just look at Tanner Scott. Just look at Devin Williams. Like, look at some of these guys that were some of the best closers in all of baseball, and then what they did in 2025. And with the market already being at this price point, and Raisel Iglesias saying that $16 million per year price point, and there being talks with Ryan Helsley possibly being stretched out as a starting pitcher, which we'll go into after this little saga that we're going into here. And one thing we see at every single trade deadline is that a lot of teams, especially contending teams, go out and get those bullpen arms because you have a lot more of an idea of how they're going to perform that year because you've seen it for 80, 90, 100 games. So you have a lot more of a visual. You have more certainty in what you're going to get out of your bullpen arms. So just with the current market right now, I think it's a big risk to go out and sign, unless it's the Edwin Diaz. I think that's an exception. But even if it is the Ryan Helsley, if it was the Raisel Iglesias, even if it is the Devin Williams, there's a lot of risk that comes with a lot of these bullpen arms. And I think if you're going to, again, we're not the Los Angeles Dodgers. You got to think that there is some sort of budget restraints. They should continue to spend. They should be a top 10, probably top 5 spending team in the payroll. But I would be a lot more comfortable going out and, getting one of those top end of the market, starting pitchers, or, get a Kyle Tucker, get a Bichette, rather than throwing $20+ million at a bullpen arm who has had a very good track record, but can blow up and not be, in the piece that you need him to be for this Toronto Blue Jays bullpen.
Yeah, Carter, that's sort of exactly my sentiment, is that in at least in the year, you get to see who is on and who is off. If you sign a guy in the offseason and they don't bring their best stuff this year, well, it's a bad signing. So why not wait until the trade deadline or at some point during the season when you have a good, when you've seen enough of games from these guys and decide who is worth your time for a trade or whatever else. So yeah, it's an interesting conversation to have. And I know you sort of talked a little bit about the potential of him moving as a starting pitcher. No, I'm out on that. I don't love when these teams transition guys from a bullpen arm into a starting pitcher. There was conversations about Louis Varland transitioning into a starting pitcher. I don't like it. For me, especially with the position the Toronto Blue Jays are in right now, just coming off of a World Series appearance, is the fact that I just don't love the transition period. I think there are going to be speed bumps along the way, and where this team is at right now and their willingness to spend and trade and win, you don't want a guy that's going to be in a transition period where he was having success and then you rip success away from him because you're trying to move him into a new role. I think this is not a time to be firing things against the wall and seeing what sticks. This is a time to get those surefire guys that you know exactly what they're going to do. It's the low floor, right? That's what or the high floor. That's what you're looking for. You don't want these guys that the volatility, I guess, is at the end of the day what I'm trying to talk about here. Because, yeah, I think I would be worried about moving a guy into a starting pitching role, a guy that I already don't really think they should or need to go out and get in free agency, and then to transition him into a starter. I think that's just wild, Carter.
See, I'm still in on Ryan Helsley with all the kind of talk that we've still had, but at a certain price point. Because are we going to be upset if the Toronto Blue Jays don't go out and do anything just because the bullpen market's high? Well, that would upset a lot of fans. That we would be upset about that. If you run back the current bullpen right now and don't make any additions, that is not going to be a good thing. It just depends on, you got to get value in these bullpen arms. You got to kind of assess the risk and then assess the money that you're laying out. Again, in terms of term, if it's a 1-year deal compared to like a 4-year deal with Ryan Helsley, he's 31. So term isn't necessarily the biggest concern for me. It's just more so what kind of version of Ryan Helsley are you going to get? And what are you going to have to pay him is the biggest thing for me. And would that money be better off, spent somewhere else? And again, in starting pitching, in a position player and things like that. But like they have to take a shot on one of these top bullpen arms. I think that's kind of where we're at. It's just, you got to get the value for it. Whether it's, if you can get a guy though, like for example, Devin Williams coming off a very bad year, like Sean Armstrong, for example, Pete Fairbanks, that the Toronto Blue Jays are in on. Some guys that maybe will have a lower market price And maybe you wait on a bullpen arm as well. You see what the market is like. If some of these top of the end bullpen arms go off the market as they wait farther and farther, free agents wait farther and farther into this offseason, and they get closer to December and January, they might get cold feet. They might think, hey, I kind of want to get my spring training in, because we know that if players don't get their spring training in, it usually leads to a dip in performance in the following season. So I'm not completely out on Ryan Helsley. Again, the guy throws 90, like he wakes up and he throws 100. That's something that you definitely could want in your bullpen. He has shown success in multiple years. From 2022 to 2024 was absolutely insane. It was really good in St. Louis as well. Just maybe a different setting in New York. Again, not coming out as that closing pitcher. Again, do you think that is something that because we talk about, for example, like Vladimir Guerrero Jr., where he hits in the batting order, and you definitely have said that there is some significance in that. Do you think it's kind of the same thing for bullpen arms? Like, do you think that a lot of those bullpen arms might be more comfortable in positions that they're accustomed to and the positions that they're kind of used to being thrown out in? Like for Ryan Helsley, he's just used to being a closing pitcher. Then he goes to New York and now he's a setup man. Is that something that should, signify a difference in production?
It's a little bit different for me than where you're batting in the lineup, but yeah, I mean, there's always something to that. Maybe it's the fact that, hey, there's a guy on this team that this team trusts more than me, right? And some guys aren't used to that. They're used to being the big dog, and then you're turned, it turns out that you're not in your new team, and a lot of guys do struggle with that. And if it's in the batting lineup, if it is in the bullpen, so sure that can be the case. But at the end of the day, you hope that some of these guys can figure it out, and some guys can, and some guys can't. It's the sort of the shot you take when you move a guy from a different role, and not that it's a crazy different role, but it is a different role at the end of the day. But Carter, in saying all that, I know we have had many conversations about Ryan Helsley, and we will continue to have many conversations. But an ex-Blue Jay, we have to have a conversation about Alek Manoah. What in the world is happening there? Also, some big trades we'll break down a little bit coming up in the third segment. Stick with us after this short break. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You guys know how much I love FanDuel. I talk about it all the time because it's my only place to place my bets. And I'm not going to lie to you, I have been winning a lot. So that helps too. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. There's also NFL, NHL, PWHL, if you like women's hockey. There you go. All these other leagues, you can bet on legitimately anything. Even if you miss the start of a game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Today's episode also brought to you by Doer, and I can tell you for a fact, me and Carter absolutely love their clothing. Their jeans are unbelievable. They fit well. They got that classy sort of jeans look, but they still have the flexibility, so you don't feel like you're necessarily wearing jeans all day long. And that's one of my biggest complaints when I wear jeans, is that I just can't ever, I don't ever really feel comfortable. And their shorts, the material is fantastic. So like I said, Doer combines classic jeanwear style with the kind of comfort and performance you get from athletic wear. Best of both worlds sort of thing. Designed to look great and stay comfortable all day long, no matter what you're doing. They're pioneers of blending technical innovation with everyday clothing. They invented the original performance denim. Simply put, Doer makes the world's most comfortable pants without having to sacrifice style. You can check them out at 44 Ossington Ave in Toronto. Pick up a pair for yourself, or as an amazing holiday gift, you can mention the promo code LOCKEDONTORONTO in store to get 15% off your first order. Again, that's Locked On Toronto, or check them out online at duer.ca/LockedOnToronto for 15% off. That's duer.ca/LockedOnToronto. So, Carter, as we continue on I don't know if it's the ongoing saga that I should be calling this. I'm not sure what it is. Alek Manoah was, the Braves declined to tender contract for the 2026 season with Alek Manoah. So, I don't think it's just the Jays that maybe didn't see a future with Alek Manoah. It was also the Braves. How do you feel about this one, Carter?
Sort of expected. I mean, he was only going to be owed $2 million, but clearly there's some injury concerns that they got to be worried about to non-tender Alek Manoah. Again, I didn't realize like he was 27 years old. I feel like he's been in the league forever, which I mean, he was 23 in his Cy Young finalist season. So that's probably why, just making his mark very early. And then it's kind of been a rough go, honestly, since then with the 2023, with the struggles he had being sent down, not showing up to AAA camp. Then obviously the Tommy John, the rehab, all the injury stuff, being released by the Toronto Blue Jays, and then being non-tendered by the Atlanta Braves. Not the greatest couple of seasons for Alek Manoah, unfortunately. But the reason that we're talking about this is now we could have a little bit of a reunion with the Toronto Blue Jays. And it wouldn't be, they're signing him on like a $9 million deal. It would probably be a minor league invite with minor league signing with an invite to spring training. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about is, would you be open to a reunion with Alek Manoah? So I just wanted to go over a few stats just to kind of see where he was at, because I wasn't really following along with him too much throughout the season. Obviously, on 62 is a lot of baseball games to watch, and Alek Manoah was not really on the priority list at that time. But throughout, he made seven. I just went over his 7 most recent starts. That was with the Buffalo Bisons, but obviously spent 2025 kind of rehabbing. And over his last 7 starts, the 7 most recent starts, he had a 2.97 ERA over 33.1 innings. This part of the issues, though, is it was a very noticeable velocity dip with Alek Manoah. Again, with a lot of these injuries, you do tend to see, especially with Tommy John, early on, and then sometimes it's persistent, that these velocity dips are persistent, and they are consistently, instead of the 93 that kind of Alek Manoah was accustomed to, kind of sitting at the 91, which is a very big difference, especially when you're not a guy that's throwing, 98 or 99 to begin with. But in those starts was kind of sitting in that 91 to 93 range, which isn't the worst thing, but there was a very noticeable drop off as he continued to pitch into the game. As soon as he got to the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th inning, it would almost drop below 90 miles an hour. And as an MLB starting pitcher, that just really isn't going to work. And as for reference, his average fastball velocity during that Cy Young finalist season in 2022 was 93.6. So now he's pretty much sitting in that 91 to 93 range early on in the game, and then it's consistently dropping off as he was pitching in Buffalo. Velocity dips obviously are never a good sign. And then when you pair a lot of the other stuff that comes with Alek Manoah with some of the attitude problems, again, not reporting to training camp, some of the quotes that we have seen from Alek Manoah, not reporting to the AAA. I said training camp. Again, not a little bit all over the place this episode because off yesterday's festivities. But there's a lot more than just, the pitcher that comes with Alek Manoah. It's the personality that you have to balance as well. And not the greatest farewell party in terms of the Toronto Blue Jays and, leaving a good taste in fans' mouths. So would you even be open to an Alek Manoah return, or do you think that's just, too much going on with Alek Manoah?
Well, I hate to say this because I'm sure Skylar Peters would love to put back on his Alek Manoah Toronto Blue Jays jersey. This is an absolute no for me. I haven't been in love with Alek Manoah even when he was coming up and had that great season. The personality problems always didn't sit well with me, and he was very young at that point. He hadn't proved anything. He had one good season. You could call that a fluke. We talk about, where do you judge players? Is it based on their best season or is it based on their worst? It's somewhere in the middle. It's based on everything you see from them. And what you would call an outlier season for Alek Manoah, absolutely, because we haven't seen anything like that since. So no, I don't think bringing back Alek Manoah is a great idea. I think let him go to the win. This is one you lost on, right? And whatever. And he was in 2021, Carter, that's fantastic, right? Alek Manoah was Alek Manoah. That's fantastic. Great for all of us. I think we've all moved on. And I don't know how the listeners feel about this. Maybe you're in a different spot than I am. I'm an absolute no on Alek Manoah.
I'm holding on to the 2022 Cy Young finalist season. So I think that's the only reason why I'm even kind of considering it. And that's one of the reasons we're talking about it on this podcast. I would be relatively open to it if there wasn't that noticeable of an injury concern. Because what we've seen with the Toronto Blue Jays, I might be open to it, but I just think this is not going to happen whatsoever. There's actually a 0 chance, I think, that they bring back Alek Manoah, just based off how much they know his personality and how they treat other pitchers within the organization when they have been injured. Let's look at Nick Sandlin being non-tendered. Had an injury, looked pretty good, honestly, in the 2025 season, but again, there's some concern there. They cut ties immediately. Eric Swanson, another guy, had an injury, comes back, doesn't look like himself, cut ties immediately. Jordan Romano, another guy, had some injury concerns, and they did not waste any time getting rid and moving off of Jordan Romano. So I just don't think it'd be necessarily worth it for them with all of the concerns that you have with Alek Manoah. And then just, again, how big the ego is kind of from 2022. Had that one good season and all of a sudden thought, he was like Clayton Kershaw, Max Scherzer, one of the all-time greats. So I think the ego has hopefully taken a hit, and hopefully he is a little bit, more humble in his ways. But I think a team will probably take a chance on Alek Manoah. I think it will be, starting off with a minor league deal, and maybe he does get back to the major leagues. And I honestly hope that he does get back to the major leagues. But if he does, maybe stay in the NL, maybe stay away from the Toronto Blue Jays, because somehow he'd come back to haunt the Toronto Blue Jays. Don't go to the Dodgers either. But I'm wishing the best for Alek Manoah, but I don't think it's going to be with the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? And I think back to 2021, 2020, when we were all thinking about what can Alek Manoah do? What is he going to be? And then we got 2022, and it was excellent and awesome. And like I said before, I'm just sort of over it. I mean, I'm not going to spend – this is probably the last time that I talk about Alek Manoah until he signs, a big deal or he starts in the MLB once again. So – I'm sort of going to leave it there, Carter. But not only Alek Manoah, not only is there free agency, there are some massive trades going on within the MLB right now, Carter. Let's take a quick pause. We'll come back. We'll tell you guys all about that, because it does sort of make you think, what can the Toronto Blue Jays maybe pull off? We'll come back right after this.
Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans and cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at the checkout, it can definitely be frustrating, and that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all the fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. Another great feature about Game Time is they have this little thing where you can see exactly where your seats are and see what the view is like from those seats. You can compare different spots in the stadium, in the ballpark, in the arena, wherever you guys are enjoying your sports games. So that is something that I love about Game Time, and just how authentic they are. The lowest prices that we've really seen on game tickets. So we definitely have been taking advantage whenever we have been able to go to sporting events. Download the Game Time app and create an account. You can use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today.
So, Carter, as we continue on, I said a massive trade in the MLB. Take it how you want it, but it does open up a lot of possibilities for the Toronto Blue Jays. We talk about trades all the time, but I'll break this one down, let you guys know sort of what's going on. The New York Mets and Texas Rangers made a trade, sending Marcus Semien to the Mets and outfielder Brandon Nimmo to the Rangers, and that was from Jeff Passan. That's where I first saw it. Anyway, so interesting move there. Bit of a shakeup. But Carter, my biggest question is, do you see the Toronto Blue Jays pulling off maybe a big off-season trade that could send some players one way and somebody else back to Toronto? Or is that more of an in-season trade deadline? Should that be where we're focusing on for trades?
I think we will see a trade this offseason. I think it's going to be one of those random ones like the Andres Gimenez trade. I don't think it'll be as significant as Marcus Semien for Brandon Nimmo. That trade, again, pretty interesting for both sides, especially the Mets side. Like, you're getting a 35-year-old that just probably had his worst season, debatably of his career. Again, he's getting paid a lot of money, $25 million a year, and he had a 669 OPS in 2025. You got to think that maybe his best seasons are behind them. But when you look at Marcus Semien as in totality, again, you look at the career, like just the player that he is traditionally. Again, I'm not going to completely judge him off one down year, but a little bit of an interesting move. But I don't think the Toronto Blue Jays would make a trade that significant, because they'd have to make, I think that the biggest trade that they would make is probably like a moving of Addison Barger. And that would have to be, an insane, that would be like a Freddie Peralta type deal. And I don't really think that's necessarily in the cards, but I think that is the max that they would go to. Another trade that happened, which I was very surprised about, is the Grayson Rodriguez trade from Baltimore, getting to 1 year of Taylor Ward. And in the most Angels way ever, for a guy that has had a million injury concerns, they don't even get a physical from Grayson Rodriguez. They're just hoping that he's okay. And that just kind of sums up what that franchise looks like for me. But absolutely insane stuff. We've seen Grayson Rodriguez when he is healthy. Again, I don't want to prey on anyone's injury concerns and prey on their downfall injury-wise, but it's definitely nice to get that guy, if he is healthy, out of this division. And for a team that just has no pitching, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. You got a lot of outfielders on the Baltimore Orioles that can hit for power, that can slug, and you don't have a lot of starting pitchers. You don't have a lot of talented starting pitchers. So a little bit of a head scratcher there. But yeah, like seeing these trades just makes me want a transaction, a signing, a trade, like just something for the Toronto Blue Jays. I get Ross Atkins is going to make moves and we have to be patient, but I'm starting to feel impatient, and especially when you don't have Toronto Blue Jays baseball to watch.
Yeah, Carter, as we sit here waiting for moves to happen, it does sort of suck, right? At the end of the day, I think that's what every Blue Jays fan is sitting here hoping and waiting for, because at least then it moves the conversation, right? It shows us a little bit of a look into what the 2026 Toronto Blue Jays will be. Right now, we're all just sort of standing pat, and I don't necessarily love that, but I think it was expected. I think that's what we knew was going to come out of November. I think you said it perfectly early on. It was that, hey, you should probably wait till December. That's when things really start to get moving. So I'm hoping that it's an early December move and not a late December move, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. As always, we want to thank everybody for tuning into the podcast. We're back with you guys every day here until I think probably middle of December, and then we go down to 3 days a week. So just giving you guys a little heads up on that.
It'll be usually just after the winter meetings for a more specific date. So it's probably the week after those winter meetings. We'll drop to 3 week. Again, we'll still be coming at you with all the Toronto Blue Jays content. There's a signing. We'll obviously go live. Like we'll do additional stuff for you guys as well. But maybe Ross Atkins just needs another cruise. Like maybe he just has to go on the yacht one more time, and that will, excite him and get him, active in the free agent market. Because that's what it took last year. He got exposed one time and called out, hey, had to be here on the yacht. And that's kind of why like the MLB free agency sucks compared to other free agencies, because everything happens right away. And now you have to be patient. You got to wait for MLB free agency. You got to wait until the top tier players go off the market. And hopefully they fall the Toronto Blue Jays way. Hopefully we can get lucky and see, and hopefully some of the predictions, the wild predictions that I've seen for a lot of Blue Jays fans on Twitter, getting Bichette, Kyle Tucker, Edwin Diaz, Ranger Suarez, Framber Valdez, let's get that kind of offseason going. I'll take one of them at this point.
Yeah, as always, thanks a bunch for tuning in. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow with more Blue Jays content right here on Locked On Blue Jays.